The classroom buzzed with the usual mix of chatter and laughter, but today it carried a different weight. Serafina, with her hair perfectly styled and designer clothes, stood at the front, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Hey, Ethan," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "Nice uniform. Did you get it in the clearance bin?" The room erupted in laughter, the sound echoing off the walls like a wave crashing on the shore. But as the laughter faded, an uncomfortable silence followed, hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Ethan sat at his desk, his face falling as the laughter washed over him. His torn uniform was not just a joke, it was a reminder of the struggles he faced every day. He felt the heat rise in his cheeks, a mix of embarrassment and hurt. "Very funny, Serafina," he muttered, trying to smile but failing. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, and without another word, he walked out of the classroom, leaving behind a trail of laughter that felt hollow. Serafina watched him go, the laughter of her classmates fading into a distant hum. For a moment, she felt a flicker of regret, but it was quickly overshadowed by the thrill of being in the spotlight. Yet, as she glanced around the room, she noticed the uneasy expressions on her friends' faces. Was it just a joke? Or had she crossed a line? The question lingered, a seed of doubt taking root in her mind. As Ethan stepped out into the schoolyard, the bright sun shone overhead, contrasting sharply with the storm brewing inside him. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the sting of Serafina's words. But just steps away from the school, everything changed in a heartbeat. A car sped around the corner, tires screeching. Ethan barely had time to react before it was too late. The world blurred into chaos, the laughter from the classroom now a distant memory. Back inside, Serafina felt a sudden chill. The air grew heavy, as if the laughter had been sucked out of the room. "Did you see that?" one of her friends gasped, eyes wide. Serafina's heart raced as she glanced out the window, her stomach dropping. The scene outside was chaotic, people rushing toward the street, and amidst it all, she saw Ethan lying on the ground, motionless. Panic gripped her as the realization hit her like a tidal wave. Her words had consequences, and now they were real and frightening. She had been the last person to see him, the last person to make him feel small. Guilt washed over her, heavy and suffocating. "What have I done?" she whispered, her heart pounding as she grasped the gravity of the situation. As sirens wailed in the distance, Serafina's mind raced. She had never considered how her actions could affect someone's life so profoundly. The laughter that once filled the room now felt like a cruel joke, and she couldn't escape the gnawing feeling in her chest. She had wanted to be funny, to be liked, but now all she felt was a deep sense of loss. The chaos outside continued, but for Serafina, time stood still. She realized that her life, filled with privilege and laughter, had just collided with a painful reality. The weight of her words hung over her, and she understood that the road ahead would be anything but easy. Would she be able to face Ethan again? Would he forgive her? As the sirens grew louder, she felt the tears spill down her cheeks. In that moment, she knew she would never be the same. The sun poured through the windows of Serafina's home, casting warm rays over the lavish decorations that adorned her life. She stood in her room, surrounded by designer clothes and glittering jewelry, preparing for yet another extravagant party. Her laughter echoed through the halls, a sound filled with joy and carefree spirit. "This is going to be the best night ever," she exclaimed to her friends, who giggled in agreement. Meanwhile, a world away, Ethan was sitting at a small kitchen table, burdened by the weight of his responsibilities. The kitchen was dim and cluttered, filled with the remnants of a family struggling to make ends meet. "Mom, I'll take care of the groceries," he said, his voice steady despite the worry etched on his face. He looked at his mother, who was worn down by work and stress. "You need to rest." As the days passed, Serafina's parties continued, each one more lavish than the last. She danced under shimmering lights, lost in a bubble of privilege, but the laughter began to fade as Ethan's accident lingered in her mind. The stark reality of his situation was brought to her when a group of volunteers approached her at the hospital. "Excuse me, miss, a kind woman said, her eyes gentle. "We are looking for people to help support Ethan and others like him. They need all the help they can get." Serafina hesitated, her heart racing. "Ethan," she whispered, the name feeling heavy on her tongue. "Yes, he is one of our patients. He has been through a lot," the woman replied, her voice filled with compassion. Suddenly, the laughter of her past felt hollow. "What happened to him?" Serafina asked, unable to mask her concern. The volunteer explained the extent of Ethan's injuries. "He will need time to heal, both physically and emotionally," she said softly. Serafina's chest tightened as she realized the impact of her words. She had been the last person to see him before the accident. Guilt washed over her like a cold wave. "I need to see him," she said, determination in her voice. Walking into Ethan's hospital room felt surreal. The bright lights contrasted harshly with the shadows of her guilt. She hesitated at the door, taking in the sight before her. Ethan lay in bed, his face pale and fragile, a stark reminder of the pain she had unknowingly caused. "Ethan," she whispered, stepping closer. His eyes opened slowly, revealing a mix of confusion and anger. "What do you want, Serafina?" he replied, his voice a mere shadow of its usual strength. I came to see you," she stammered, feeling the weight of her privilege press down on her. "I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean to hurt you." Ethan's gaze hardened. "You think sorry changes anything? Your words matter, Serafina. They hurt." Serafina felt tears sting her eyes. The vulnerability in his voice struck a chord deep within her. "I didn't understand," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I was caught up in my own world, and I didn't think about the consequences." As she looked at him, she couldn't ignore the resilience he displayed despite his situation. Ethan's spirit seemed unbroken, and it forced her to confront her own emptiness. She had lived in a bubble, surrounded by wealth and privilege, but what did it really mean? "Why do you care now?" Ethan asked, his brows furrowed, challenging her sincerity. "I care because I see you," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are strong, and I admire that. I wish I could take back what I said." Ethan looked away, his expression softening slightly. "It's hard to forget, but I appreciate your visit," he said reluctantly. Serafina nodded, understanding that this was the beginning of something greater. She realized that her privilege had blinded her to the struggles of others, but now, standing in this hospital room, she felt a spark of change. "Can I come back?" she asked, hope creeping into her voice. "Maybe," Ethan replied, a hint of uncertainty in his tone. "Just be genuine. That's all I ask." As she left the hospital, Serafina felt a mix of guilt and determination. She had seen a glimpse of Ethan's strength, and it ignited a fire within her. She knew this was just the beginning of her journey, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. The air in the hospital room felt heavy as Serafina stood before Ethan. She could see the pain etched on his face, a mixture of anger and hurt. Every time she opened her mouth to speak, the words seemed to stick in her throat. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope, and she felt like she was walking on it, afraid of falling. I'm really sorry, Ethan," she finally managed to say, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean what I said that day." Ethan turned his head away, staring out the window, his expression unreadable. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Serafina," he replied quietly. His voice was filled with a deep sadness that pierced her heart. "You made a joke, and I got hurt. It's not that simple." Serafina felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had never seen Ethan like this before. The boy who once joked with his friends and smiled easily was now wrapped in bandages, a clear reminder of her careless words. "I know it's not simple," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to fix it." "Maybe you can't fix it," Ethan said, turning to meet her gaze. There was a fire in his eyes, a mix of pain and defiance. "But you can try to understand. I have dreams, Serafina. I want to be more than just the kid with a torn uniform. His words struck her like thunder. Serafina had always lived in a world of parties and luxury, where her biggest worry was what dress to wear. She had never stopped to think about the dreams of someone like Ethan. "What do you want to be?" she asked, genuinely curious. Ethan hesitated, his brow furrowing. "I want to be an engineer. I want to build things, create something that helps people. But how can I do that now? I can't even walk right." Serafina felt a lump form in her throat. She had been so wrapped up in her own life that she had never considered the depth of Ethan's struggles. "You will walk again," she said firmly. "You're strong." "Strong?" Ethan scoffed, the bitterness in his voice cutting deep. "I don't feel strong. I feel broken. And you don't get it. You live in a bubble, Serafina. You don't know what it's like to fight for every little thing." The words hit her like a slap. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she knew he was right. She had never fought for anything the way he had to. "You're right," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I don't know what it's like, but I want to learn. I want to help." Ethan's expression softened a little, but there was still a wall between them. "Help? How do you plan to do that? With pretty words and empty promises?" Serafina felt the weight of his words. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I want to try. I want to make things right." Ethan looked at her, and for a moment, they were both silent. The hurt hung between them, but so did a glimmer of hope. "You have to mean it," he said finally. "This isn't just about you feeling guilty. It's about understanding the real world." "I will," she promised, her voice steady now. "I will learn. I will try to understand." As Ethan looked away, Serafina felt a shift within her. This wasn't just about an apology, it was about a journey. She had lived a life filled with privileges, but now she began to see the emptiness behind her glamorous facade. In that moment, she realized that her life choices needed to change. She wanted to become someone who could lift others up instead of pushing them down. "You're not broken, Ethan," she said softly. "You're just reshaping yourself, and I want to be part of that." Ethan didn't answer right away, but she could see the conflict in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for them to connect. "Okay," he said finally, his voice softer. "But it's going to take time." Serafina nodded, feeling a sense of determination swell within her. She knew this was just the beginning, but she was ready to face the journey ahead. Serafina sat at the edge of her bed, her heart racing. The decision to join the support group felt heavy, yet liberating. She had seen Ethan suffer, and the guilt of her past actions gnawed at her. "I need to do something," she whispered to herself. Gathering her courage, she headed to the community center where the group met. As she entered the room, a circle of chairs welcomed her. A few familiar faces among the group made her feel a little at ease, yet the air buzzed with unease. She took a seat and listened, her mind racing with thoughts of Ethan and how she had treated him. The group leader, a kind woman named Lisa, began the meeting. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we are here to share our stories and support each other." Her voice was warm, inviting trust. One by one, the members began to share their experiences. A man named Sam spoke first. "I lost my job last year, and it hit my family hard. I never thought I would need help." His voice trembled, and Serafina felt a sting of compassion for him. She realized that everyone here had faced struggles she had never understood. Next, a young girl named Mia shared her story. "I was bullied in school. It made me feel so small." As Mia spoke, tears rolled down her cheeks. Serafina felt her heart ache for this girl, remembering her own actions that had caused pain. The realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. She had been the one who laughed, the one who perpetuated the hurt. When it was Serafina's turn, she hesitated. She started, her voice shaking. "I haven't faced struggles like many of you. I've lived a privileged life, but I hurt someone, and it changed everything for me." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. She took a deep breath. Ethan was bullied by me. I made a joke about him, and then something terrible happened. The group listened intently, the weight of her confession hanging in the air. I came here to learn how to help, to understand, she continued. I don't want to be the person who brings others down anymore. A woman with soft eyes replied, It takes great strength to admit when we've made mistakes. You are here now, and that's what matters. Her words wrapped around Serafina like a warm blanket. As the meeting went on, Serafina began to feel a sense of belonging. The stories shared resonated within her. Each tale of struggle and resilience opened her heart wider. She realized that the world was much bigger than her own experiences. After the meeting, as the members mingled, Serafina found herself speaking with Mia. You are really brave, Serafina said, admiring the girl's courage. I can't believe you shared your story. Mia smiled shyly. Thank you, it's hard, but it helps to talk about it. Serafina nodded, feeling a connection. I want to do better, to use my voice to help, not hurt. As they spoke, a sense of hope filled the room. Serafina felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just a girl from a privileged background. She was becoming part of a community that valued empathy and kindness. That night, as she lay in bed, Serafina reflected on what she had learned. She realized the power her words held. They could either uplift or tear down. I want to use my words for good, she murmured to herself, feeling a new determination swell within her. The next day, she approached Ethan at school, her heart pounding. Ethan, she called out softly. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. I want to help, to make things right. Ethan studied her for a moment, and then nodded slowly. I appreciate that, Serafina. It's a start. In that moment, Serafina felt a spark of hope. This was just the beginning of her journey, but she was ready to embrace it. She was ready to be a voice for change, to stand up for those who felt small. And with every word she chose, she would strive to bring light instead of darkness. The day of the school presentation arrived, and Serafina stood at the front of the room, her heart racing. The classroom buzzed with whispers and laughter, but today, she felt different. Today, she was ready to confront her past. She glanced at Ethan, who sat quietly among their classmates, his expression a mix of curiosity and caution. Taking a deep breath, Serafina began, I know I have hurt someone very important to me. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward her. She could feel the weight of their attention, the gravity of what she was about to share. I used to think my life was perfect. I had everything, parties, friends, and no worries. But I didn't see the pain I caused others, she continued, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I made a cruel joke about Ethan's torn uniform, and I laughed along with everyone else. I didn't think about how it might hurt him. As she spoke, she noticed Ethan's gaze on her, a mix of surprise and skepticism. Why are you telling us this now? He asked, his voice low but clear. Do you really think it matters? Serafina swallowed hard and nodded. It does matter. I've realized that my actions have consequences. I've seen how my words affected you, Ethan. I saw you in the hospital. I saw your pain, and I felt guilty. I realized that my privilege blinded me to the struggles of others. The classroom remained still, absorbing her words. She continued, I want to change. I want to be better. I want to help, not hurt. I know I can't take back what I did, but I want to use my voice to make a difference. Ethan shifted in his seat, his expression softening slightly. It's not easy to forgive, he admitted, but I appreciate you saying this. It takes courage. I'm trying to find that courage, Serafina replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. I hope that by sharing my story, I can inspire others to think before they speak, to consider the impact of their words. A few students nodded, looking thoughtful. One girl raised her hand. What can we do to help? She asked. How can we make sure this doesn't happen again? Serafina smiled, feeling a flicker of hope. We can start by listening to each other. we can create a space where everyone feels safe and valued. We can stand up for those who are hurt by words or actions. It's about building empathy." Ethan leaned forward, his expression more open now. "I think that's a good idea. We should all be more mindful of what we say and how it affects others. It's not just about us, it's about everyone around us." The room buzzed with newfound energy as students began to share their thoughts. "I've seen people be mean too," another student said. "We need to change that." Serafina felt a wave of relief wash over her. As she looked at Ethan, she saw a spark of understanding between them. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. Maybe forgiveness was possible, and maybe healing could begin here. As the presentation came to an end, Serafina felt lighter. "Thank you for listening to me," she said, her voice steady. "I hope we can all learn from this and support one another." The bell rang, signaling the end of the class. Students began to stand and gather their things, but Serafina noticed that the atmosphere had shifted. There was a sense of connection in the air, a promise of change. Ethan approached her. "You did well," he said, a small smile forming on his lips. "I mean it. You opened up, and that takes real strength." "Thank you, Ethan," she replied, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I hope we can keep talking, keep learning from each other." "I'd like that," he said, his smile growing. "Let's make sure we do." As the students filed out of the classroom, Serafina felt a sense of hope blooming within her. Maybe this was just the beginning of something beautiful, a chance for healing, understanding, and most importantly, friendship. As the weeks passed, Serafina began to change. She embraced her new role as an advocate for those in need, using her privilege to uplift others. It was as if she had opened her eyes to a world she had ignored for far too long. She often found herself at the community center, volunteering with the support group that had become a part of her life. One sunny afternoon, Serafina stood in the brightly lit room of the community center, preparing for an upcoming event. Ethan was there too, adjusting the decorations. Their friendship had deepened, and there was a sense of mutual respect that neither had expected. "Do you think we have enough chairs?" Ethan asked, glancing around at the empty seats. "Definitely, and I think we should add a few more decorations over there," Serafina replied, pointing to a blank wall. "It will make the space feel more welcoming." Ethan nodded, a smile breaking through his usually serious demeanor. "You've really changed, you know? It's nice to see you caring about this stuff." "I've realized it matters," she replied softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "I want to make a difference, even if it's just a little bit." As the event approached, the support group members prepared to share their stories. Each story was a piece of their lives, filled with struggles and triumphs. Serafina was nervous, but she felt a strong connection to the group. They had all faced challenges, and their courage inspired her. On the day of the event, the room filled with people. Laughter mingled with nervous chatter as the community gathered to listen. Serafina stood at the front, her heart racing. Ethan sat in the front row, giving her an encouraging nod. "Welcome, everyone," Serafina began, her voice steady. "Thank you for being here today. We're excited to share our stories with you." She glanced at Ethan, who smiled back at her, giving her a boost of confidence. One by one, the members of the support group shared their experiences. A woman spoke about her struggles as a single parent, while a young man shared his journey through recovery. Each story resonated with the audience, creating a tapestry of shared humanity. Finally, it was Serafina's turn. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her past on her shoulders. "I used to think my life was perfect," she began, glancing at Ethan again. "But I learned that real life is not just about privilege. It's about understanding and supporting each other." The room fell silent, everyone listening intently. "I hurt someone deeply with my words, and that pain opened my eyes. I realized I had to do better. I want to help others who are struggling, just like Ethan and the amazing people in this group." As she spoke, she could see the empathy growing in the faces of her classmates. Some nodded, Others wiped away tears. The impact of her honesty was palpable. After the event, as the crowd dispersed, Serafina felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had shared her truth, and it felt liberating. Ethan approached her, his expression warm. "You did great," he said, sincerity shining in his eyes. "Thanks, Ethan. It felt good to finally say it out loud," she replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I think people are starting to understand," Ethan replied, glancing at the crowd. "Your story made a difference today." Serafina smiled, feeling a sense of purpose blooming within her. "It's just the beginning. We can keep doing this together." Ethan nodded, his eyes sparking with determination. "Absolutely. We can create a community that supports each other." As they discussed future plans, Serafina reflected on her journey. She had come a long way from the girl who made cruel jokes. Now, she was surrounded by people who shared their lives and supported one another. Later that evening, as Serafina walked home, she thought about the connections formed that day. The laughter, the tears, and the shared stories had woven a fabric of understanding among them. She realized that true empathy and connection could reshape lives, including her own. In that moment of reflection, Serafina understood the profound impact of what they had created together. She felt grateful for the journey she had taken, one that had opened her heart and changed her perspective. With newfound strength, she was ready to continue advocating for others, knowing that every story shared could ignite change. Share this story if you believe that empathy can bridge even the widest divides. Leave a comment about a time when a simple act of kindness made a difference in your life, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Together, we can create a community that uplifts and supports one another.